MSNBC Katie Phang discusses why LGBTQ plus rights are critical and what the GOP is doing to stop them. A few weeks ago, Queer News Tonight anchor Al Ferguson sat down with MSNBC's Katie Phang to discuss her colleague Jonathan Capehart, what MSNBC has been doing to cover LGBTQ plus issues, and her time living in South Florida. She also discusses the Republican Party's attempts to block LGBTQ plus protections.
Well, as you know, Queer News Tonight is getting ready to broadcast our national evening news broadcast for Queer News Tonight from the Miami Beach Convention Center. We're here at the National LGBTQ Task Force, and we are so happy to introduce Katie Phang from MSNBC. I'm fanning out here because I'm a news junkie in LGBT. And your new show on the weekends is absolutely awesome.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you.
And I did not know you've lived here in South Florida a long time.
I have. I've lived here since I've been 7 years old, which has been a long time. I've got good genes, I promise. But yeah, I've lived here since I've been 7 years old. And so I've seen a real evolution to the city. Not all good, but I've definitely seen an evolution to the city.
Yeah, and your weekend show that you do at MSNBC, I understand you're broadcasting. Correct me, at Telemundo.
I am. I broadcast
at the studios.
That's right. 7 a.m. live on Saturdays and Sundays.
And 7 a.m. You'll continue to get a better and better and better slot. But you know that I'm a news junkie because I could probably tell you last weekend every story you did.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that. I'm really flattered, actually.
And it's so smart. Which is one of the things I really appreciate. And cable sometimes, especially, my best friends in the 8, 9, and 10 slots at Fox, sometimes not as smart as it should be. And I really enjoy your show. Now, you're here at the task force because you're going to be introducing the leadership winner.
I am.
Tell us a little bit about what you're getting ready to do.
So I'm honored because I've only been working as an anchor and a host for MSNBC just since March of this year.
March.
And I've had my own show, and they asked me to introduce my friend and colleague, Jonathan Capehart, who is...
He snagged that great interview this week with the president.
Spectacular.
Yeah.
Everybody has to tune in and watch that full interview with
That's
President
right.
Biden. But it was my honor to be able to do so because Jonathan truly is a mensch. He is warm and outgoing and so smart and so sharp. And he really is somebody that I consider to be a mentor for what I am doing at the network. And so it was my honor to introduce him. You
know, the National Task Force is at the forefront of the fights and issues that relate to LGBTQ equality. Florida has been a battleground in 2022. We have watched. Yes, we've watched. I'm curious, being here in South Florida and what we've watched from the State House, from our governor and our state senator U.S. Senate seat that's running for re-election. What's your take about what we're watching in our politics in Florida and specifically and in general around the country?
So that's always a great question. I say tongue in cheek that Florida is the epicenter of all things messed up. Sometimes I use a little bit more colorful language when I do describe it. And who would have thought that this would become a major battleground state for the culture wars and for all of the fill in the blank. I mean, it's literally anti-fill in the blank legislation that Governor Ron DeSantis and his very red state legislature is trying to pass. I don't think that there's a minority group that has not been targeted as of right now. And so the real challenge is, number one, not feeling defeated, not feeling like we're not going to be able to overcome and prevail. And number two, education. So the biggest compliment you can pay to me is that you feel like my segments are smart. When I first took on this role, I swore that the one thing I wanted to do was to have somebody tune in, watch, and leave and say, hey, you know what? I learned this on Katie's show today, and whatever it is. And that is what we have to do. We have to continue to educate our voting populace, because if they understand what's at risk, and when they don't feel like, oh, it's someone else's problem, then they'll be invested, because it eventually will be their problem. If we do not keep this type of very fascist, autocratic dictatorships in check, the next group is going to be you. And so I think it's really important for people to have empathy these days and to have the patience to open their mind and their hearts and say, I don't want to have that be the case where people feel alienated and ostracized. And unfortunately, Florida is getting that reputation. And so we're fighting the good fight down here as much as we can.
Yeah, and I encourage LGBT America, if you haven't watched Katie Phang yet, you should. One of the best compliments I can give you in terms of that education and the walkaway is the most popular news host in LGBTQ community is not Anderson Cooper. A lot of people think it is. It's Rachel Maddow. And your show reminds me of that in so many ways because you help walk the viewer through here's what's happening and dissect what the problem is and what the issues are related to it. And high praise to you for what you're doing in your show. And as you do that, I have seen a number of segments where you've taken on equality issues and many advocacy issues. Why, for the LGBTQ community and that audience that would watch you, why is that important to you? Why is equality issues, regardless of the area or the segment of population you're focusing light and attention on? Why is it important to you?
Because humanity is important. Because it doesn't make a difference what we look like on the outside. We're all the same on the inside. And I think that if we allow hatred, and again, this idea of ostracizing groups of people and not treating them all equally, if you allow that to happen, then there's no humanity left. And, you know, I hate sounding or having people think I'm being hyperbolic when I say this, but our future is at stake. I have a 8-year-old daughter, or a little girl who's about to be 8 years old. She doesn't see color. She doesn't see race. She doesn't see gender. I mean, she doesn't judge because we're not raising her to do that. That should be the next generation. But we're still here, and I want to live in a world where there's this true meaning to equality. It's not lip service. It's not people trying to, you know, say that exists. I want to actually experience it, and I want that for everybody, which is why when there is injustice, we highlight it on my show. But when there's a solution that can be had, or there's somebody who can bring a solution to the table, and maybe they just need that voice, that's what I want my show to be able to do.
That's fascinating to me. Your goals for Katie Phang and what you're doing at MSNBC, what are we going to see over the course of next year? This task force gala is going to come back to Miami Beach Convention Center next October. Amazing. When I talk to you next October, you're going to say, here's what I did in these 12 months.
I am going to have presented all of the issues in a clear, coherent fashion so that people can be educated when they go to vote in November. Go out and vote in those midterms. It's the most important time to do that. And I'm also going to make sure that I bring a lot of voices to my interviews for my segments that are big and small, some that are maybe relatively unknown, so that people can have a glimpse into the world of someone else. And I think that's when it opens the doors for people's eyes and minds to be able to see how other people live, how they think. And I think that's a really important way of people being able to have a little bit of empathy in this world.
Very interesting response. Last thing I wanted to ask you about is your time slot. A lot of people, I watched your launch when the show launched, and I've told you what mine and many of my friends' reaction that are news junkies. A lot of people say on the weekends, 7 a.m. is a time period where it's kind of unusual to deliver a show like you do. It's not 9 p.m. on Mondays like Rachel Maddow does now. We accept Monday through Friday that the news is important at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. Any reactions to people surprised that a show as smart as yours would be done at that time? On the weekend?
Well, so what's very neat is I live on 2 different platforms. I also have my show, all original episodes on Peacock. So there's an MSNBC hub on Peacock. I tape that show on Thursdays and Fridays, but it is not the same show that you see on Saturdays and Sundays. The Peacock platform allows for longer form interviews. Unfortunately, with live TV, as we know, sometimes my segments can only be 6 minutes long, tops, because of commercials, etc. On Peacock, for example, I just did a segment yesterday that was 15 minutes long. And it had a Republican state senator and a Democratic state senator from Florida to talk about the alleged voter fraud that is going on in Florida that doesn't exist, and Ron DeSantis's election integrity police force that he does. But on the weekend, the idea behind the first live show at 7 a.m. is kind of the very beginning of the show is, what'd you miss last night? If there's some major breaking news, as you're getting up, making your coffee, maybe having breakfast, getting your life ready for the day, what was that major breaking news that happened overnight? I'll give you a little bit of a squib of it and a little taste of it, but then I really want to get into the meat of these major issues in a substantive way. I hope that people are happy with that it's not for them to just turn it on and tune out. I hope they're like turning it on, watching, and even if you're doing something else, you're still paying attention, because if you are, and again, my reward is if you leave and you go to that baseball game with your kid, or you go to the grocery store, or you go to the coffee shop and you talk about it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I want to have happen.
Yeah, exactly. LGBT South Florida, and really our audience all over the country, do yourself a favor and tune in to Katie Phang on Saturday or Sunday. You're going to learn something, but more importantly, you're going to become, just like Al, a loyal fan of the show. Thank you very much for being at the National LGBTQ Caucus. And we can't wait for the introduction and the celebration of his award tonight. Thank you
so much.